So I did that, graduated, and of course, as many of you on here, I'm sure, kind of have experienced, you don't land what you want right out of college often. You know, the people that do are lucky to do so, but sometimes you go through the jobs and things like that you don't want to do to get to where you want to be. So I kind of maneuvered into the radio industry a little bit, did a little bit of work for a local radio station here, did some voiceovers, some commercials, things of that nature, and actually worked at a station as well for quite some time during school and after school as well. And after I graduated, I worked for oil and gas company, which was a great experience. Learned a lot, totally outside of my comfort zone or necessarily what I wanted to do. But I did that for a while. And in the background of all of that, I would be very active on social, particularly on Twitter. And I would kind of take to myself and kind of live tweet the Rockets games just from my account. Just because I was a sports nerd and it's something that I enjoyed to do. And it wasn't necessarily at the time the most common of jobs out there. It had just kind of been picking up and just starting. And I started doing it on my own, and the Rockets account actually would support me quite a bit by retweeting a lot of my stuff. And of course that account had, you know, several followers. So every time they would kind of support me as a fan, it would bring more followers and bring more attention to what I was doing and things of that nature, which really helped me kind of kickstart my career in that direction. And eventually, for me, it wasn't a traditional path to kind of getting this job. I didn't take necessarily a formal interview or a formal entry into signing up for the job. The Rockets actually reached out to me via direct message. Wow. And started a communication process with me, and started talking about what I was doing and why I was doing it the way I was and things like that, which I thought was really cool of them. Our senior director digital, his name is Paul Suarez, and he's the one who kind of reached out and gave me my first opportunity. And he's here to this day. I worked with him for all 5 of my seasons, and I've always been appreciative to him just to kind of find me in that group of social media folks who do amazing things and reach out and ask, hey, would you ever want to do something with the Rockets? And of course, you know, I was all about it. So we got a chance to meet and kind of worked our way from there. And ever since then, just been kind of climbing that ladder, just as all of us who are in the industry have been through. Started doing some email marketing for the team initially and kind of stepped in a little bit with the social aspect of it, but it was a much smaller team 5 years ago. We've grown tremendously since then. Yeah. So it was a great opportunity for me to kind of work with a very tight-knit group at the time and learn and just absorb as much as I could, because it's one thing to be a fan and bring that perspective. And then once you start with a team, it's a total different process. You know, you're not so much asked to be opinionated as you are to be factual and, you know, promote the brand and marketing. And that was an aspect that I wasn't too familiar with at the time. I was just kind of free range for me as a fan to be doing what I was doing. So that was the transition that kind of took place. And ever since then, it's been, for me, I'm lucky enough to say a dream job with my home team, which I know many people wish they could find an opportunity to do at some point in life. I was lucky enough to have that as my first opportunity. So yeah. That's kind of how I got that process started and got to where I've gotten to now.
Yeah, that's great. So it looks like a few more people have joined. I'll just quickly say, you know, if anyone wants to ask any questions, feel free to type them into the chat and we'll call you out to unmute yourself and ask the question of Hiren. So yeah, please feel free to ask questions throughout, so we can keep this interactive. If not, you know, I'll have some questions lined up. And this is called No Offseason. It's our webinar series by Slate. We're a platform that helps teams create on-brand social content. So I wanted to get that out of the way. But yeah, Hiren, that's great. And I know we have a lot of students and folks who are about to graduate who join this. And it's just interesting to hear how, you know, you started your career path outside of social and sports, but we're still doing that personally and kind of finding a way to, you know, build up a resume or at least experience through your own account. You know, are there some tips you have for folks who, you know, may not be able to get that job at a club right now, for ways for them to, if you were interviewing a coordinator or an intern, kind of what are those things that you look for besides just having had the job?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main pieces of advice I would give, just as you mentioned, while I was doing something totally different, I still kept my passion alive in the background. And that's important to do, to not stop your direction that you want to head into. It may not happen in a year, it may not happen in 2 years. You never know when it could, but it happens fast when it does. And to be able to kind of sit and continue your passion, keep doing what you're doing, it gives you that confidence when the time comes to be ready that, yeah, I'm pretty confident on these platforms. I've done a lot of this. And you kind of come in, I guess you could say kind of just rough, right? You don't have the finer points, and you're not quite refined as a social media expert until you get into a position like this. And you start to see that the responsibility that you have is extremely, extremely important, extremely stressful at the same time, because you make a mistake in this industry, it's very public and everybody sees it. But then you have some successes and you do really well and everybody sees that as well. So it's really a balance. But my advice would be just to continue to keep pushing in the background. I actually used to do some blogging about the Rockets for sites. I would reach out to local sites in your city and ask them, hey, I'm just interested in getting articles up on the internet with my name on it, and having the ability for when an employer comes out and reaches out to me, they search my name and they see some great content just sitting on the internet there that's, written well, or you've had an opportunity to do some sort of interview and you have it cataloged and you have a portfolio and you have a YouTube page or whatever the case may be, that you think would help you in your path. I think all of that stuff really helps, because we have an unbelievable opportunity with the internet in general to display what we're doing in a really unique way, and in a really inexpensive way as well, which is very helpful, because I know students, that's a big challenge. You obviously want to get kick-started into a career and start making money and start being on your own, and that's really hard to do. So I think, yeah, just continue to follow your passion by doing even what may be the littlest thing. Even if you speak to a group of 3 people and you think, oh, it's not really a big deal, it is a big deal. Even if one of those people have something nice to say about you, or say that you've helped them or inspired them or done whatever, that goes a long way. And I think eventually it leads to your employer seeing that, and your team seeing that, and knowing that, okay, when you step into this industry, you realize that you have to work as a team. If you are not leading and you're not working as a team, it's impossible. It really takes several large people to kind of come together and do all of this. It's really not one person putting together that account that you're seeing. There's so many people involved. So that's one of those things. The more people you work with, the more you do, I think it'll lead you to just a more comfortable position when you get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I would say, a few things that helped in my career, and I'm sure you would attest to this, like even yourself personally, like a lot of people in the industry are willing to take a phone call or an email and give informational advice, and just have as many of those conversations as possible, because you're going to learn really great things from each individual and come prepared with really good questions. And there's skills that anyone can learn, in the meantime, that are valuable for social media, like graphic design, writing, even kind of data analysis, and things that you could pick up just like, you could post content online. There's also a ton of resources to learn new and more specific skills to social media. But let's transition a bit to the Rockets and the content there. I'd love to talk about your approach and your club's approach to social content, because it is interesting and it's really unique, and I think really considered best in class in sports. Tell me a little bit high level about, your approach to content with your team and how that's evolved over time a little bit, with, also how social has evolved and where the focus has shifted in the past few years.
Absolutely. I appreciate the kind words on that. And yeah, it has evolved significantly since the 5 years that I've been there. And it already kind of kickstarted before I ever got there. Twitter being kind of the main source of live information. It really is a unique platform for us as just sporting, in the sporting industry, just because it's one of the only platforms that you can post things live as a game is going on. On Facebook, the strategy is so different. Things start to push maybe a day later, even 2 days later, sometimes on your feed. Instagram working the same way as well. So it's very unique. But from our perspective, I think from our group, as we've grown, we've kind of identified who kind of strives in what particular area, which is really nice, because as you keep working, you start to realize what your niche kind of is and what you feel really comfortable doing. And at the same time, I'm a big believer in it with our group, in letting all of our group kind of dabble in every single platform. We're very, very proactive about not having one person just stick to one thing for the entire season. We're not, or at least me particularly, I'm not too big of a fan of that, just because I think it opens up creativity when you start to rotate people in and out of games on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, things like that. So we have this really unique opportunity where with us, every game day is different. We have somebody running a specific platform differently each game day. So I could be on Twitter one day, but the next game I'm on Instagram, the next game I'm on Facebook, and then I rotate back to Twitter. So that's kind of been our philosophy, and I think it's worked really well. We keep a consistent brand message throughout that process, but for the most part, we give quite a bit of freedom to our group to kind of post and do as they please during the game, just because, one, we've developed a trust amongst each other, which is really important. Obviously, especially when you're doing live content, you really have to believe in that person to do the right things and not have to, sit over their shoulder and start to, micromanage the process, I guess. But in this sense, I think all of us kind of have that understanding where if we're going to ever take like a big risk or do anything too crazy, we really do come together as a group and talk about it before. It's really not something we just do on the fly or just kind of, flipping a coin and hoping it lands on the right end of it. That's not something that we tend to do often at all. We actually come up with these ideas, talk about it as a group, run it through the process so it can be approved properly, things of that nature. So when it comes to that, I think that process really separates us, and a lot of teams have started to do that. As you can tell, there's a large meme culture in social media now. There's a lot of humor that's taking place on social, and it's definitely one of those things that you have to balance. Some people enjoy it, love it. They just take it as a comedic process of the brand. And then some people can get offended by it too. And some people may not enjoy it very much either. So you have to be respectful of your audiences across all platforms. And when we develop things, I think we know where it's going to succeed the most. So not every single platform necessarily sees the same content all the time. So something that you see on Instagram may not be posted on Facebook because the demographic is totally different.
Yeah.
And when we do things like that, the goal is that if we're posting something, we want it to be understandable from the end user. We don't want to have to be sitting there explaining to you why we did it. We want it to be pretty clear of why it's funny or why it's informative. And if that message is not clear, then it's usually not worth, putting that on that particular platform. So we've kind of tested, and our director of digital content strategy, Stephen Goldfried, he really runs those numbers in the background and really looks at what's working and what's not working for us. And that's really important for us because it gives us the demographics, it gives us age groups. It tells us a lot about who we're talking to on each platform and what kind of humor can be placed on a certain platform versus, what can't and what won't work. And that's really important. It's important to develop the data, as you mentioned. And I know a lot of people who want to get in the industry think it's just posting social media. It really isn't. There's so many facets to deciding what you actually end up posting. And, there's content strategy, and then there's also the numbers and everything else. So that part of the process is kind of how we develop everybody's roles. And we've kind of realized, where everyone kind of strives and how we can bring that together as a group and lay out the final product of what you see.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up some of the memes that you guys do. And I feel like in general, the NBA has been a little bit more progressive in that than other sports. And it seems like it's starting to pick up. I'm actually going to share my screen here. I have a few memes picked out, which you should be seeing now. I'd love to hear from you because I follow your content closely, and I feel like you guys do a good job you have a healthy mix of very highly produced, very on brand content that looks really good. And it almost makes the memes even funnier, like when you drop one. So I want to know a little bit about, you know, is there a strategy? How much of it could you let us in on like, you know, is it only after wins? Is it only a few times a week? Like, when do you let yourself kind of go into this space to have it still be funny and different? But, you know, versus the content where if I'm just going to your feed, like a lot of very highly produced, great imagery, great design, and then stuff that's very much like meme specific. How do you guys approach that? And yeah, is there a strategy behind it? A lot of it does have to be reactive too. And how do you balance that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. We try to do a good balance of it, and the memes. You know, we've got somebody on our team, Chris Hendoyo, who's, we call him the meme expert, and he's like the meme collector. It's one of those things where you open his phone and he's just got a folder of memes that I've never even seen. It's super funny, and we'll get into our meetings and he'll kind of explain to us like what's trending, what's kind of on top of. So something like that, you know, I had never seen it until he showed it to me, and he was like, "Well, what if I put, you know, Russell Westbrook's head on there and we win the game?" And you know, that's kind of, we obviously pre-planned a lot of this, and
Yeah.
we had two versions of it. We had a James Harden and a Russell Westbrook version as well, thinking that, hey, who's going to have a really big game tonight? You know, let's be prepared. And that's one of the important things we do with the preparation, is making sure that that meme is relevant to kind of what's going on for that night. So if it's a big game, we certainly talk about how we can amplify our content like this, because we're going to have a lot more eyes on us for tonight. It's a national TV game versus, you know, all that kind of stuff. So you kind of start to debate and see, depending on who you're playing and the day of the week and the time and all that, and decide, hey, when would be a good day to drop this meme, you know? And it's funny. It's funny to talk about, but you know, things like that, the amateur sketch one, that one's been around a really long time. You know, it's a classic. So he kind of took that out of the past and brought it to the present and was like, hey, what if we just did this? And it's sometimes it's as simple as just thinking what would be funny, you know, not necessarily what's going viral right now, but what would genuinely just make people laugh. And that was something that even 10 years from now, I think we would still be laughing at that, you know, that interview and the meme and all the funny things that was associated with that particular, you know, piece of content that came out. So we kind of plan in that sense. And then from there, as you mentioned, like to make it look really natural, we just leave it the way it is. You know, we don't try to make it look like a really, really clean, high, you know, edited meme of some sort. It's just what the natural meme looks like. So it's a nice break from the very clean content that we have in our platforms, that we constantly put out. So Terrence Daniels, who does our video, he kind of leads the video team for us. Is one of the producers of many of these amazing video pieces, and he's got two guys as well, Zach and O'Shea, who are a lot younger, and they bring a whole different aspect to the video, you know, world of what we're doing now. And this year, one of our main focuses was to really up our video, and I think we've done that. We've accomplished that. We've gotten some really unique angles. If you notice, a lot of the way that it's shot is different than what the normal television broadcast is.
Yeah.
We tend to see television broadcasts all the time. So what can differentiate us a little bit from that? So they, you know, those guys travel with the team as well. So that gives them a great opportunity to kind of be courtside and film from a perspective of like, what would it look like if a fan had a courtside seat? You know, that's kind of the experience we'd like to bring to a fan who has never sat there. That's what it would look like, you know, from that angle. So that gives us a really unique perspective, other than just what you see on television, which is what the masses end up seeing. So we're able to kind of balance. And then our senior creative designer, Jose Lopez, who creates all the graphics with his team, you know, they jump into the mix with us, and we're just kind of a big group, really, that again, we've kind of strived to figure out who can do what and who can do what really well. And instead of trying to force something, you know, try to use the tools that you have within your team to reach out to those people who do those things at a high quality level and develop, you know, a bond and bring that all together. And for the most part, I feel like we do a really good job of, you know, having fun and doing things to the best of our ability, and then really upping it a notch. And
Yeah.
every season when it ends, we sit down and we say, well, we can't come back with that next year. So what are we going to come back with next year? You know, and that's kind of the good thing that I appreciate most about our team and how we do our process is that it's very rare that we just stick to one thing. You know, we really do kind of try to just test the waters a little bit. And we're lucky. It requires a lot of trust from the higher ups for us to be able to do some of those things. And that's, you know, that's part of the process. Some teams have that. Some teams who even want to do it may not have that ability. That's an organizational philosophy, I think. And, you know, we're very lucky. We've had a lot of opportunities to be unique and out there and just do sometimes really crazy memes and stuff like that, which is really cool.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, there's, you know, with Steven kind of leading the charge on data, you know, that's how you're going to get buy-in from higher ups who may be skeptical or may say, hey, this is off brand. But, you know, show them the data and say, hey, this actually is on brand for us on social media. And this is how people want to consume and interact with us on this platform. Just like people in stadium have a certain expectation and you deliver that. It's just a different space. And it's interesting. I do think, you know, there's a balance that you guys strike really well where, you know, I'm sure a lot of those memes are like some of your highest overperforming content, but you keep it that way by not flooding the feed with as many as you can. You kind of pick and choose those moments. Simra had a question. Simra, did you wanna unmute and ask there?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Simra, and I am the digital content intern for the Milwaukee Bucks. So as someone who has jumped around different industries, I started in corporate finance, then I moved to agency life, and now I am working with the Bucks. What advice do you have for someone to continue to learn more about the sports industry, especially during this unprecedented time, and especially to make yourself unique in interviews for full-time positions?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And yeah, similar to kind of what I was saying earlier, continue to kind of look through a lot of the teams as content. It's something that I really enjoy doing, is going through the process of looking at different teams and not just the NBA, but looking at the NFL, looking at Major League Baseball and trying to see what each league is doing differently and kind of preparing for the process of, okay, this is something that, you know, after you look at the content, it's kind of like, okay, this would work in the NFL, but would it work in the NBA? You know, would it translate properly? Things of that nature. So kind of going through teams and, you know, in a way we're all competing against one another, but at the same time, the way I look at it is it's very inspiring to see other content. It's super motivational to see other teams' content. And it's really great to develop relationships with those people. I have a lot of close social friends on every majority of the teams. And while it is competing and you see charts and you see which team's doing what and all that good stuff, I think what makes the NBA really special is that it really is a social community. You can see teams kind of go back and forth with each other. You can see teams piggyback off of each other. Teams support each other when something tragic occurs. You know, it really is a community. I mean, it's important to have that. So I think looking at other teams, looking at their processes and what you can kind of get without being totally in the process and just trying to pick up on things like that. Things like this, you've had some great speakers on here who have given some really great insight from other teams and picking up off of this kind of stuff. And you, Simra, you're with the Bucks, so you already have a unique outlook as well, just with, you know, part of that process. And I'm sure you'd see more and more over time. So I think just sticking with learning about social trends, subscribe to social websites that kind of drop information every single day about, you know, what a new app is doing or why it's working and why it's not. There's several websites out there that have blogs and newsletters that kind of keep you in the loop. Because I think once you start to go through your interview process and you kind of know everything and you know, hey, look, you know, this new app is coming out in 2 weeks, you know, is that something you guys would ever explore to do? You know, just being in front of all of that kind of shows that you're proactive and that you're all about social. You know, you're not doing it because it's just a job. You're doing it because you love it. You enjoy it. It's what you do in your pastime. You know, it's just part of your fabric and process. And so I think if you come into an interview just being real and showing that, hey, look, I have a lot of passion for this. It's not going to feel like work for me. It's just going to feel like, you know, a natural addition to my life, really. That's big. I think that speaks volumes of just being real and prepared, organized, and just educated, and obviously whatever team you go to, do the research, know their history, know the current roster. You wouldn't imagine how many people come in not knowing a full roster on the team they're applying for. That's never ends well. So just simple things, basic things, not to really overcomplicate anything, just to kind of remember that, hey, look, if I come in not knowing my stuff, do I really deserve the job in the first place? Ask that question to yourself before you walk in there, and then just be prepared. And I think, things tend to work out pretty well.
Thank you.
No problem.
So going back to kind of your game day strategy, I think it's super interesting that you assign a different person to a different platform each game to mix up, everyone stays interested, engaged, and kind of gets to have that change. When I was at the Niners, this was 4 or 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, actually, we didn't do that. I remember I was on kind of Facebook like all game, and my coworker was on Twitter all game, and that was just kind of what we did. But it is a really good idea to mix it up. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Do you have a favorite platform day when you're like, yes, I'm on Twitter today, that's my jam, I'm on Instagram, or is it all the same to you and you just like mixing it up?
No, I love Twitter. That's my jam all day. Yeah. I still use my personal account quite often. I'm a big movie fan, so I've kind of transitioned my personal account from sports to movies a little bit more, just because we do so much with sports as it is on the main account. But I love Twitter. That's always been my number one, and it kind of is what's gotten me into the industry in the first place. So I have a little bit of a affiliation with it, a soft spot for it in comparison to anything else. It's actually helped my career in so many ways. Funny story, I met my wife on Twitter. So I'm totally about the hashtag we met on Twitter. That is so real to me. So when I see people use that, I'm like, yeah, that totally relate, So for me, like, Twitter is a big part of my life. It's really funny to say that it's just a social media platform, but I've seen a lot of promising success just personally, just from using the platform. So I'm a big fan of Twitter, but I love Facebook. I love Instagram. All of them have such unique traits, but I get excited when I know I'm going to tweet a live game and it's a big game, and you just know that the responses are so quick. You're so on the spot on Twitter. No one's ever fully happy with what you're doing ever. No matter what happens, whether you win or lose. When you lose, it's like the world is ending. When you win, it's like you won the championship. It's so hot and cold, the audience on Twitter, but that's what makes it fun. That's such a direct, way of communicating with people, and it's so live. You have such a short shelf life that you just have to get it right and move on. And it's really fun to use that one.
Yeah. Twitter has been a big part of your life. You met your wife and your job, your career on Twitter. That's awesome.
Right.
So being a Twitter connoisseur and in sports marketing, what's something that you've seen recently, or, even in the past few years on Twitter, that kind of blew your mind, or was like, wow, that's different, that's unique, that's really cool? Does anything kind of stand out, or any accounts that do it really well?
I think there are a lot of good accounts, a lot of people that are just kind of natural, just people, just tweeting. I mean, if you notice, some of the things that blows my mind a lot of times, and since we're in the industry of creating content, some of the best tweets and most successful ones are just text tweets, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because you kind of forget that was kind of how it all started. That was the basics before we got really granular with it and started making these high, produced content pieces and things like that. It was just simply, it wasn't even 140 characters, or it wasn't even more than those characters, right? It was just this very minimal, if you put a link in, your tweet was done. You were out of characters. You didn't even have the opportunity to quote tweet with a GIF and do all that kind of stuff. So you were so limited to just using text. You would just kind of stop and say, well, and now it's almost like, in my world, just doing this, I can't even do a tweet without media attached to it. It's just a process that you're so used to doing. So it always blows my mind when I see something get 25,000 retweets and it's literally 40 words on a tweet. And it just kind of it's like, wow, we could spend probably a few hours, developing this one tweet. And this guy was just sitting on his couch and just boom, knocked it out. And it's the most viral thing you'll see all day. I mean, that blows my mind. It's just unimaginable that it really is that simple So I think whenever I see those things, I start to remind myself that how can we make our account look more relatable, to the common person, because that's really what we're trying to do here. How can we even get a person who's not from Houston, who's not a diehard Rockets fan, to follow us? How do we do that? And I think sometimes it's just simplifying the process. What's really unique during this hiatus process, we've really needed to become quite creative with what we're doing, and every team has. This is not something that any of us predicted would ever happen.
Yeah.
We were totally in mid-season, just about to head into the playoffs, the most aggressive time in on the court and off the court for us. And we, it all just kind of stopped. So we kind of went back, regrouped as a team, built a calendar, started talking about things that we can do. And, we have some tweets now that they are just text tweets, just, hey, tweet us your favorite Rockets moment in the history of the Rockets. Something as simple as that, that has nothing attached to it. It's just, hey, just get fan interaction, just ask a simple question, just get a simple reply. And from there, we've been quote tweeting those fans and getting those videos and actually playing those clips for them. And it makes that fan connect with you and kind of shows that fan, wow, they really do read their messages. They really do respond. They really did take the time to clip that clip and quote tweet me and put me in the spotlight. That's a really cool feeling. I used to love that feeling when I was a fan and the Rockets would just retweet me. Yeah, that was something for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I mean, this is the actual Houston Rockets account, doing that. And there is a really there's a huge importance, I think, on that's easy to forget, that just regular fans just want to see regular things. And sometimes, a highly produced piece sometimes doesn't resonate as well as just talking to a fan. And I think Twitter is one of the only platforms that literally allows you to do that, versus Instagram, that's very photo and video heavy, obviously, and Facebook as well. So yeah, I think in that process, it's just unique to see what Twitter has kind of turned into, which is definitely a accessory to a live program. The Last Dance is a perfect example. We were chatting about that a little bit prior to this, and I can't watch the documentary without being on Twitter. It's just hand in hand for me, So it's really a unique way of communicating with one another.
Yeah. And what do you think about Twitter introducing a version of stories? Is it something you're excited about or skeptical about?
I think it's interesting. I think we saw Instagram obviously take the lead on that after Snapchat kind of came out and developed something. They kind of, created their own version of it and did it at a really, really, solid pace. And it was really something we use every day. We obviously use Slate every single game for our Instagram stories. That was one of the projects that I was most excited about this season. And it really incorporated a really clean branded look. And for us, we could do it all from our phone. For me, that was very exciting to be mobile and to be able to develop something that clean for our Instagram story viewers. And there's a lot. I mean, if you notice, a lot of times, I don't know if you're like me, but when I go on Instagram, I mean, I go through stories sometimes more than I do the feed. Just going through everybody's stories, and that becomes my fix for the day, and not even scrolling for the full piece content. Yeah. So I think Twitter, it's unique. I think it works. It's something that I think makes sense for them to try at least. And their content goes so fast. It's so hard to keep up on Twitter if you take a couple hours off, you miss a lot. It's just the way the process works. So I think if stories can consolidate that for us a little bit and it gets to sitting there a little bit longer than it normally does, that's a nice little tool to add to a platform that moves so quickly compared to the rest with their algorithm and the way they're set up. It'd be cool to kind of see, what you missed. And you hit that story and you see it for 24 hours or whatever the case may be. But I know Instagram stories has become the thing. It's pretty amazing how far that process has come.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like a natural fit for Twitter, which is real time, like you said already. So it'll be interesting to see if that picks up in a similar trajectory or takes on a life of its own. And do you guys still use Snapchat similar to Instagram stories? And how do your strategy across like that platform, how has that evolved or shifted? Because like you said, only a few years ago, that was like the hot new one until Instagram stories kind of took it over. And is that still important to you guys, and how much so?
Yeah, I mean, we still use it. I think during this break, we obviously haven't put as much of an emphasis. It's just a little bit more challenging to use the platform. It's really good for, again, being live at a game and using it for that. But we were using it during the season the same way we were using Instagram stories during a game. We would kind of repurpose for Snap. But I would say that that's not the highest on our priority list. It just never really evolved into something that we could make into something great. It just never felt like we believe that we should overspend on time and things like that on something like that. But it's certainly not something we don't use either. We have followership. We have followers on the platform. We have a lot of young followers. Snapchat has, pretty young generation on it as well. So, we try to keep it proactive during the season, but certainly not too high on our priority list as far as everything else is. And that obviously would lead to a transition of TikTok. TikTok coming in is quite a, I would say, rivalry to Snapchat in so many ways, as so many people have kind of shifted over to that platform. And we were quick to jump on it. And I will say that is a total project. I mean, that really is, that is something that is such a unique platform that I don't think anybody exactly knows from a branded perspective how to amplify to the best of its abilities. But each team is figuring it out, doing different things. But it's certainly a very unique platform that I think is here to stay. I think if it starts to monetize and become even more appealing to a branded side of things, that I think you'll see it grow even more. But it really is a fascinating platform, and it's one of the only platforms that you can't build a product for and put it on anything else. Sometimes when you build something for Instagram, you could certainly use it on Twitter, you could certainly use it on Facebook, but you can't really do that for TikTok. It's such a customized process that it makes it really challenging, because you can't really just say like, hey, yeah, let's just grab that post and put it on there. We've tried it, and a lot of times it doesn't work. You really have to have a specific process for it. And we've seen highly produced pieces not do as well on TikTok as it would on Instagram, or on Facebook. So we've gotten our mascot more involved. We've seen that really do well. We've gotten other processes involved. Lindsay, who's on our team, has really kind of taken a hold of that process and tried to be creative and post. And what we've learned, I think, is that a constant stream of content is really important. It's important to keep on figuring something out, and it's hard. It's really one of the bigger challenges, because it's so new. We don't know what works and what really doesn't work. So I think for us, from Snapchat, we've kind of now shifted our focus a little bit more to TikTok, as everybody has.
Yeah. That was actually Claire's question there. But she had mentioned too, like, regular season versus now during the hiatus. Are you still trying to keep up that regular stream of content on TikTok now, as much so as you were in season?
Yeah, I think we are. And I think, it's kind of ironic in this situation, you have even more time to kind of dedicate to something like that, whereas when you're working games and you're traveling and you're doing all these different things, it's not that easy to stop your routine. Once you start getting kind of moving, you start to really roll. You're just kind of like steamrolling through things, right? You're not stopping. Your adrenaline rush is so fast during the season that you don't stop to think like, hey, maybe we should take a deeper dive to this. And sometimes that's just a lack of time, a lack of, ability to shift your focus because you have all these different projects taking place. So I think now it's really unique. We can dedicate more time to all these platforms. And I think we kind of have. YouTube has been a huge part of that process for us. We were never a team that was completely dedicated to YouTube. I don't think we had long form formats to kind of put on there and had constructed things like that ever in the past. And now we've kind of become more focused on that, because we've had more time, we've had more resources, we've had more people jump into that mix to build specifically for those platforms. So I think it's been nice, because when we head back and we start this process again, we kind of know now what works, what doesn't, what we can implement to our everyday strategies that we were doing already. And now that we've kind of had the experimental process, which is in some ways kind of been a blessing, that we've been able to stop and pause and do all these things we probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to do heading into the playoffs, one of the busiest times for us.
Right.
So, you know, in that sense, it's kind of worked out for us because I feel like we've really pinpointed some things and seen what works and what doesn't. And when we come back, I think we'll be better prepared to tackle those things, you know, given the time that we've had.
What has surprised you the most in terms of like what you've learned, either high level or a specific post or content that is performing really well right now that you may not have thought was going to perform very well or were surprised by?
I think, you know, I wouldn't say anything too specific. What we've kind of focused on during this period of kind of stoppage is the history of the Rockets. We've really taken a deep dive into the history of the team. And I think that's been really interesting because there's a whole new generation that doesn't know the back-to-back champion Houston Rockets. You know, there's a generation that knows James Harden and Russell Westbrook and guys that are currently on the team, but they hadn't seen a lot of footage from the championship days. And we've done a lot of things to kind of, you know, back that process up. We're doing different chats with Rockets legends and alumni that used to be on the team. We did a Facebook Live with them, a Q&A, which was really cool. Fans got to ask them questions while the documentary was airing on our Facebook page. So I thought that was really unique. We've also done something called Rockets Cuts, which, you know, every few days on our YouTube page, we debut an episode of this week. It's the Dream Week, which is Hakeem Olajuwon, which, you know, to me will always be the greatest Rocket ever. You know, he's to me, you know, most iconic Rocket to ever put on a uniform. So for me, I think it's really cool. And I think for, you know, I was talking to my nephew the other day, he's 13 years old and, you know, he watched it. He was like, wow, I don't really know who Hakeem Olajuwon is. And I'm just like, that's crazy to me, you know? And that wakes me up and tells me there's a lot of fans that just don't know who he is. They know who James Harden and Russell are because that's their age group and that's their era. But they don't know the past. And it's cool. We have a rich history at the Rockets. You know, it's a long-standing franchise with championships and great centers that have come through and played and things like that. So we really, I think, again, this has given us an opportunity to do some things we just would have never done during the regular season or the playoffs.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have been a spot or an opportunity for it, you know? And I think that's what's been really cool to see. And I think people have kind of liked that approach. And I've seen other teams do a great job with it as well. You know, re-airs on TV and things like that, and bringing that back to the forefront and just reintroducing some of the best moments, you know, it has been a lot of fun to do.
Yeah. The creativity the past month and a half has been really high and fun to follow. Last question, because we're up on the 45-minute here. How at all are you preparing for a return? And I know, you know, it's very up in the air as to if that's the summer, if that's next season. You know, for now, is it just to focus on what you can control in the content week to week, month to month? Or is there a kind of work that you have to be doing was it the stuff you had on ice for the playoffs before that's kind of ready to pull back? Or how is that, you know, factoring into your planning right now?
Yeah, I think right now we're still kind of waiting to hear, obviously, right, what's gonna be the plan and how we're gonna move forward. I think, as you mentioned, and you're familiar with this, working with teams, the playoffs is obviously going to be the big, you know, focus, and being prepared for that if and when we get that opportunity. To be prepared for that, to get that campaign out there, to get that imagery back out there. It's a great opportunity because you're not just jumping randomly in it. You know, I'm sure there'll be a few games that will be played and, you know, get those guys kind of warmed up again and back into the swing of things. But the playoffs is such a unique time, you know, and I think now with the process of being at home, you know, there's going to be even more people ready for it and watching it when it happens, you know, just because they've been starved of sports, you know, for the past 30 plus days. So I think we'll be ready to go just from that perspective. That'll be probably our main focus, the playoffs. But I think we're a group that's pretty stable and can kind of jump into things relatively quickly. You know, we've kept the process somewhat similar right now as we're doing it. We kind of have this calendar that we've created, and similarly, we have something called a shot sheet that we use during the season, you know, and it has a lot of similarities in that sense of who's going to do what and what we're going to be posting and things like that. So I think we'll be, you know, relatively ready to go. And I think most teams will. I don't think I don't think this will stop teams from kind of picking up right where they left off. And you have to be ready for it, because I think it's going to happen so fast, just to make up for lost time. It's really just going to roll through and get there sooner than you think. So I think it's going to be, a fun process. And I certainly hope we get to do that. And I hope the playoffs get to be played on TV. It's one of the greatest times in sports.
Yeah.
It's so entertaining. So I hope we get to see that. But yeah, I think we'll be ready to go.
Yeah.